Now, detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The seven mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult the propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek-Gilbert.
Indeed, and welcome. After a 6-year hiatus, A View from the Bunker Live is back. Coming to you and around the world from the heart of America, the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. I'm Derek Gilbert with your weekly reality bomb. And this week we talk about, well, a subject that's appropriate for this time of year. Our attention will be fixed on the army of undead creatures crawling out of their lairs to terrify the living at this special time reserved for this horrifying host. I'm not ghosts and goblins. I'm talking about politicians. It's the midterms. What'd you think? Yes, we will talk about Halloween as well. Our special guest historian and anthropologist, Dr. Judd Burton, will join us at the bottom of the hour as we talk about Halloween and the spirits behind the masks. But first, we're going to start off every week with a few items of interest, I think, that are in the news, and hopefully things that aren't getting enough attention from mainstream media, because that's what mainstream media is really good at, not paying enough attention to things that we really should be watching. In fact, the rule of thumb is if you're seeing one story really beat to death in mainstream media, look somewhere else, because it's probably a distraction. We thank you for tuning in tonight as we begin what we hope will be a long run for this VFTB Live. View from the Bunker live on Sunday nights, 7 to 9 p.m. Central Time, now that we're in Standard Time. Hopefully you set your clock back today. We are now UTC and GMT minus 6. So if you're listening somewhere else around the world, it's 6 hours different from wherever you are, if you're in Greenwich Mean Time. Anyway, you can listen live at Spreaker.com/show/VFTB. Don't worry if you don't remember that. There's a link at the website, which is vftb.net, or the easy way to do it, download the brand new View from the Bunker mobile app. Yes, we have our own mobile app. They'll give a mobile app to anybody these days. VFTB on your smartphone or tablet. This is good for the iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, the iOS devices, and Android phones and tablets. The app is available. It is free and available for you to download right now at the iTunes App Store and at Google Play. And again, there are links at the website, vftb.net. The web address is what you call an acronym, View from the Bunker, vftb.net. You can also check this out in time delay, of course, at youtube.com/derek-gilbert. That's the YouTube channel. Find us on social media, facebook.com/View from the Bunker. And on Twitter, @ViewFromBunker. Had to drop the because there aren't enough letters in the Twitter addresses. Also, I've been posting a lot lately at oneway.com. With all the stuff in the news lately about social media cracking down on conservative voices, thought it might be worthwhile checking out some of the alternative social media sites, and oneway.com is recommended. I like the layout, and I think you will too. I get nothing for saying this, by the way. I just find it easy to use. If you know how to use Facebook, you can use One Way. And really, when I thought Alex Jones got into trouble with Twitter and Facebook, that would be the tipping point at which conservatives would realize, look, we cannot let Silicon Valley, which is 90 or 95% progressive or liberal, really, because there's really nothing progressive about their beliefs. It's really a return to ancient paganism, to be quite blunt. It is. I mean, who do you think goes to Burning Man every year? It's not people. Well, it is people from the heartland, but you find almost all the major tech companies heavily represented there. Anyway, nothing progressive about that. But we can't depend on them to be the gatekeepers. We can't allow them to be the gatekeepers. Just because it's easy to use Twitter and Facebook. Yeah, we do, because that's where everybody is. But if we're ever going to break free of those self-imposed bottlenecks, we got to go somewhere else. And I noticed that InfoWars is now at oneway.com. Again, that's ONEWAY, oneway.com. My page there, oneway.com/Derek P. Gilbert, Derek P. Gilbert. So what's in the news this week? We really, while we're fixated on the midterm elections, we need to be paying attention to some things going on around the world because these are consequential. These could change everything. And there was an event this week that I think really could shake up the complexion of the Middle East. Mohammed bin Salman, who's the 33-year-old crown prince of Saudi Arabia, the son of the current king, Mohammed bin Salman is essentially the ruler of Saudi Arabia. Salman is basically letting Mohammed run with the ball. Not everyone inside Saudi Arabia is happy about that. Think of the royal house of Saud as a mafia family in Arab dress, traditional Arab dress, and you kind of get a sense for how that country is governed. And I don't think that's being too harsh. I think that's certainly the events of the last few weeks with the disappearance of the so-called journalist Jamal Khashoggi is proof of this. And I say so-called, well, I'll explain that in a minute. But Mohammed bin Salman, you might remember, last November rounded up a bunch of relatives and a bunch of the wealthiest members of the kingdom. There are a lot of very wealthy members of the House of Saud. And by the way, never ever forget the reason that country is called Saudi Arabia is because it's run by a family named Al Saud. It would be as if we here in the United States had decided to calling it the United States of Trump. Okay, that's why it's Saudi Arabia. It wasn't Saudi Arabia until about 1932. So, Mohammed bin Salman was trying to head off any potential challenges to his succession to the throne. He's looking at his dad, who's in his 80s, and hoping that he's going to get a nice 50-year run as king of Saudi Arabia. But there are others inside the kingdom and apparently now around the world who are not happy with that. And evidence came just about, just a few days ago. It was reported on Tuesday of this week that Prince Ahmad bin Abdulaziz, who's the younger brother of King Salman, returned to Saudi Arabia after living outside the country for several years. And he did that because, well, he was not in favor of the succession of Muhammad. In fact, Ahmad was the crown prince for a very brief period in 2015 until Salman said, no, I want my son here. So Ahmad's been living in London and returned to the country this week, apparently, according to Middle East Eye, which is a media group, journalists who keep a very close eye on what's going on in the Middle East. Apparently, after discussing things with officials in the United States and the United Kingdom and receiving guarantees of his security. Now, it appears that Mohammed bin Salman has lost the confidence, and maybe he never had it, of Western intelligence agencies. The Saudis and Western intelligence, MI6 and the CIA, have been partners for a very long time. And Mohammed is kind of shaking things up a bit. I mean, he's aggressively prosecuted a war in Yemen, which has created, quite frankly, one of the worst humanitarian situations on the planet. This is a proxy war between the Saudis and the Iranians, the two main Islamic powers in the world, and they're contending for supremacy in the Middle East. Or I should say two of the three, because Turkey would be the other. But Saudi Arabia represents the main Sunni power, and Iran is, of course, Shia. And they hate each other, Sunnis and Shias, even more than they hate Jews, Christian, Hindus, Buddhists, and everybody else. Because to Sunnis and Shias, the other group is a bunch of heretics who've totally distorted, twisted, and corrupted the message of the Prophet Muhammad. And I use the prophet as they would. Understand, as a Christian, I do not consider Muhammad a prophet. So anyway, the return of Ahmad bin Abdulaziz to Saudi Arabia is very interesting, especially if Middle East Eye is correct and that he's got the backing of officials, unnamed officials, inside the U.S. and the U.K. It could be that Mohammed bin Salman overplayed his hand with the murder of Jamal Khashoggi inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul a few weeks back. He has become toxic The royal family knows it, and this has given Ahmad an opportunity to press his claim to the throne. And his opposition to Mohammed bin Salman is a matter of public record. In the summer of 2017, Ahmad was one of 3 members of the Allegiance Council. This is a body of senior royals who are in charge of choosing the succession to King Salman. Ahmad was one of 3 members of this council to oppose the appointment of Mohammed bin Salman as the crown prince. And Prince Ahmad pointedly did not give an oath of allegiance to Muhammad when he was officially made King Salman's heir. And recently, when a group of Yemeni protesters began raising a fuss outside Prince Ahmad's home in London, Ahmad went out to meet them and reportedly was recorded saying, not the entire royal family is not responsible for the tragedy in Yemen. Tell Mohammed bin Salman to stop the war, end quote. So there could be some very interesting days ahead for the Saudi kingdom, and of course this will impact a lot of different things. Of course, President Trump has mentioned the rather large arms sale that the United States is in the process of concluding with the Saudi kingdom. Mohammed bin Salman has also opened, reportedly, some back-channel communications to the State of Israel, which is not officially recognized by the Saudis. But Mohammed was apparently willing to pursue a better relationship with Israel, and in fact, his plan for a new high-tech city called Neom at the north end of the Red Sea would probably have had to include some cooperation with the Israelis as well. This may all be up for grabs now as, again, Middle East Eye and other observers are saying a coup may be imminent in Saudi Arabia. And Western officials, deep state elites, may be in support of this coup. The migrant force continues to march northward inside Mexico. It is really interesting how this was spun by the media when it began. I pointed out on Skywatch TV during one of the 5 and 10 updates that USA Today actually manipulated the map showing where the migrants had originated to make it appear as though they had actually traveled a reasonable distance in the amount of time that they had been given. They had supposedly traveled something like 400 miles in 8 days. In other words, by reaching the Mexican border from their starting point on foot, they would have had to cover something like 400 miles in 8 days, 50 miles a day. And USA Today published a map showing the route that they had taken, and they deliberately, well, maybe not deliberately, okay, maybe I'm just too skeptical, but they, shall we say, incorrectly or inaccurately displayed the starting point on the west side of Honduras instead of the actual city where they originated, which is closer to the Mexican or Gulf of Mexico. So, even so, it is not likely that these people traveling, these poor, impoverished, and no doubt wanting to leave situations that are really, really harsh. And I'm trying not to be judgmental of the people themselves who are just looking for a better life for themselves, most of them anyway. But they're being encouraged by forces that don't have their best interests at heart, and the media was reporting this as though that somehow these people were walking many more miles per day than was physically possible, which is to cover up 2 things. First of all, that they're getting outside help, and secondly, that maybe this perhaps this migration began much earlier than we had been told, and that the media just wasn't aware of it, or again, had not been telling us the whole story, which is something that the major media is really good at. Wonderful line by a pundit by the name of Jim Treacher. The media's job is deciding which facts to ignore because they might reflect badly on the Democratic Party. Just bear that in mind. Keep that in mind whenever you're watching CNN, MSNBC, or any of the major newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, whatever. Just remember that journalists in the major media are simply Democratic operatives with bylines. So anyway, President Trump has delegated or allocated more troops to the Mexican border, supposedly 15,000 troops now being sent to the border, which is more soldiers than we have in Afghanistan. You know what? That's a good thing because, frankly, they do more good for you and me on the border, keeping people out that we don't want in, than they are doing in Afghanistan. And in fact, this fact was admitted in an interview just the other day. The new general who is in charge of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan, General Austin Scott Miller, in an NBC News interview, said that the Afghanistan war, the war against the Taliban, cannot be won militarily, and peace will only be achieved through a political solution. Now, this might be surprising, but I agree with General Miller. And in fact, I've been agreeing with that sentiment now for many, many years. Just bear in mind, when we first entered Afghanistan 17 years ago, many of the soldiers who are now on the ground or in training with the United States military were still in diapers. I mean, isn't that ridiculous? And there really isn't, quite frankly. After the point was made and the Taliban was dealt a pretty sharp blow back in October of 2001, there really wasn't anything geopolitically to gain by staying in Afghanistan. Not for the average American, anyway. Now, in the minds of the deep state elites who actually make the decisions and sell the supplies and the hardware and the software to the military, yeah, there was a lot to be gained. War is a racket, as the famous Marine Corps General Smedley Butler once wrote. But for you and me, the average American, there really was nothing for us to gain by staying and occupying Afghanistan. And the Taliban is smart enough to know this. The Taliban is smart enough to know this. They realize that just as the Russians eventually left back in the 1980s, the Americans will eventually go home. And the people who collaborated with the Americans when the Taliban comes back and returns to power will not be treated well. They've made that clear already. So for General Miller to acknowledge this fact publicly may be awkward for the deep state, but it is true, and it's just common sense. This is why Afghanistan is called the graveyard of empires. Look, the rules of engagement that our soldiers operate under is much more restrictive than what the Russians placed on their soldiers, and they finally gave up and went home. It's about time that we do the same. You're listening to A View from the Bunker Live. I'm Derek Gilbert, coming to you Sunday night. It is November 4th, 2018. Let's not jump ahead. We got a lot between now and 2019. I should point out that if you're listening live at Spreaker, Spreaker.com/show/VFTB, there is a chat room, and I see a number of folks in the chat room. So thank you for joining. I will tell you, by the way, yes, good point. Jamal Khashoggi. I didn't touch on this. I mentioned this several times on Skywatch TV at 5 and 10. Jamal Khashoggi is being represented by the major media as a journalist. He was an American citizen and a columnist for the Washington Post. Well, yeah, but he was also a member of the Khashoggi family, which is close ties to the Saudi royal family for generations. Khashoggi's uncle, in fact, was the son of the personal physician of the first king of Saudi Arabia. And Khashoggi's uncle, Adnan Khashoggi, was probably the most notorious arms dealer of the 20th century. So, and he was right smack in the middle of the Iran-Contra affair. So Khashoggi was closely tied to Saudi intelligence and, yes, was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. So thank you for reminding me of that. That's why I said what I said about Khashoggi, so-called journalist. Yeah, he was a journalist, but... well, if you're listening to this program, you probably are savvy enough to know that intelligence agencies have been using journalists to spread their message for generations. For generations. In fact, it's no longer called a psyop. I looked this up. The subtitle of my previous book, The Great Inception, is Satan's Psyops from Eden to Armageddon, because I love the alliteration. But come to find out that psyop is a deprecated term. It's no longer applicable In fact, the term PSYOP has been the victim of a PSYOP. Nobody likes to think their psychology is being manipulated. And that's what PSYOP means, psychological operation. Disinformation or misinformation to get people to change what they believe based on bad information, or only telling them what you want them to know, which again is a description of how the major media operates. But the term now is MISO, Military Information Support Operation. Military Information Support Operation. That sounds like a help desk, doesn't it? Hello, Military Information Support. How may I help you? That's what Jamal Khashoggi was doing in writing for various media outlets. And again, as a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, he wanted a return of an Islamist, a religious Islamist state, and was whacked because he spoke out once too often, wrote once too often, in a negative way against the Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman. And again, when you're dealing with a family like that, that's what happens when you talk bad about the head of the family. Speaking of the CIA and operatives and what they do, it is now being reported by Cheryl Atkinson, former CBS journalist and now an independent journalist, that the Central Intelligence Agency during the Obama administration was intercepting sensitive email communications between members of Congress and their staffs and whistleblowers inside the intelligence community who were trying to let Congress know about misdeeds, about malfeasance. Now, these are contained in 2 letters of congressional disclosure or congressional notification that were written to key members of Congress more than 4 years ago, March of 2014, but they've been kept secret until now. In these letters, the then Intelligence Community Inspector General, Charles McCullough, advised 4 key members of Congress that during routine. It's a typo. During routine counterintelligence monitoring of government computer systems, the CIA collected email between congressional staff and the CIA's head of whistleblowing and source protection. Inside the United States government, whistleblowers are supposed to be protected from retribution. Doesn't always work that way. A fellow recently who was basically had his career and his life more or less shredded by the FBI because he was telling people in Congress about what was going on. Here we're finding out now, 4 years after the letters were sent to key members of Congress, that then CIA Director John Brennan, the director of the CIA for Barack Obama, was in charge of the agency while it was monitoring the communication of U.S. government officials, members of Congress, and staff members of our representatives. That is controversial enough, but in this case, the CIA picked up very sensitive email between Congress and intelligence agency workers who were trying to blow the whistle on wrongdoing inside the agency. According to McCullough, the Inspector General at the time, most of these emails concerned pending and developing whistleblower complaints. And he wrote, "I am not confident that congressional staff fully understood that their whistleblower-related communications with my executive director of whistleblowing might be reviewed as a result of routine monitoring." Apparently, the CIA had no problem essentially spying on members of Congress, and in so doing, getting a hold of communications from whistleblowers who are supposed to be kept anonymous and protected from retribution. Chuck Grassley, by the way, Senator Grassley of Iowa, is the one who made these public. These were released on Thursday. And Senator Grassley, who doesn't mince words, was not happy. I quote his statement here. "The fact that the CIA under the Obama administration was reading congressional staff's emails about intelligence community whistleblowers raises serious policy concerns as well as potential constitutional separation of powers issues that must be discussed publicly." According to Grassley, He'd been trying to get these letters released for years, but was met with bureaucratic foot-dragging led by Brennan and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. So, surprise, surprise, surprise. And one final note here to call to your attention, because this is like something out of a horror film, rather appropriate for this time of season. A federal appeals court in Minnesota has issued a very odd ruling in the case of a mother who claims her underage son was given a sex change operation without her consent. Think about that. Without her consent. Woman's name is Anne-Marie Calgaro. She sued the county, the school district, and medical care providers who bypassed her consent as legal guardian of her son, who was 17, who was given transgender services and hormone blockers. School officials who helped Calgaro's 17-year-old son through the sex change process argued that he should be treated as an emancipated minor because he'd been living on his own and had a letter of emancipation, though it was not legally binding, end quote. So the district court judge ruled in May of last year that even though the son was not legally emancipated and Ms. Calgaro's parental rights remain intact, he ruled against her in this case, arguing that the parties involved could not be sued for violating her rights. That, frankly, makes no sense. Now, there's a lot that obviously has gone on in this case that I'm not aware of, so I'm not going to pontificate here, but I think the key takeaway is that the government, aided by activists sitting on the bench, are happy to rule against parental rights if those parental rights, if we as parents exercising our rights, try to go against the social justice narrative of the day. In this case, a parent who is shocked and dismayed that her child, whether he was living on his own or not, has made a life-changing and life-altering decision, and a decision that is permanent. I mean, at some point in his adult life, this young man, who is still a man regardless of what he looks like on the outside and what surgery has been done to him and what narcotics he's taking to change his body chemistry, he is still a young man. Someday may choose to go back and live as a man again, live as a male. But he will forever be mutilated. You cannot reconstruct what has been surgically removed. That's just a fact. And I don't bring this up because of any ill will or bias or fear of people who identify as transgender. It's just stories like this really disturb me because transgender activists admit, by their own statistics, 41% of people who identify as transgender will at some point in their lives attempt suicide. Now, the rate in the general population for attempted suicide is more like 4%. I could be wrong about that number, but it's not much more than that. There is a reason that the rate of attempted suicide is so much higher among people who identify as transgender. And it's not because people like you and me saying, this really is a mental illness and needs to be treated, not encouraged. It's not because people with that view of transgender are hateful. So that's and the idea that a judge could rule in this way. Say, yes, ma'am, your rights as a parent are still intact, but we're not going to punish the school district who helped your son attain this life-altering surgery without your knowledge or consent. This is like something from this is Orwellian. But sadly, I think this is the kind of thing that we're going to see much more of in the years ahead. Well, this is a time of year where we take a look at the Tropes of the season. And again, now we're not talking about the midterms anymore. We'll talk about that some more later. Can you believe here in Missouri, we've actually got 3 different ballot initiatives to legalize cannabis? 3 different competing ballot initiatives. We'll talk about that after we get past 8:30. But first, what is the spirits behind the mask? Author, archaeologist, historian, Dr. Judd Burton joins us next. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.
From the Garden of Eden to our current day, dark Luciferian entities have worked to destroy mankind, while biblical prophecy points to a soon-coming war between earthly governments and a clash of colossal proportions. Dr. Thomas Horn says you cannot understand much of the Bible unless you read and grasp the revelations in the Gods of War Super Collection. For your $35 donation during this very limited time offer, you'll receive The Alliance of Evil, the groundbreaking new book by Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, which unveils the prophetic new dual Cold War between the U.S., Russia, and China unfolding across the global spectrum now. The Gods of Ground Zero, that explains the supernatural forces operating behind current global events. And The Last Clash of the Titans, which analyzes the most overlooked prophecies in the Bible and explains how Jesus Christ himself will soon go to war against the gods of antiquity. But with this 3-volume critical collection, you'll also receive completely free of charge the brand new, never-before-released full-length DVD, War of the Gods, Volume 1, Search for the Titans. Walk one-on-one with your personal guides, Derek and Sharon Gilbert, through a tour of the Holy Land, including Shiloh, Bethel, and Mount Hermon. You will see where the final battle between God and the rebel angels will take place. And you'll explore for yourself Sardinia's megalithic tombs of the giants, their connection to the ancient Canaanites, and the final battle. And that's not all. You'll also receive for a very limited time the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas R. Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America. Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality. Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies. And unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. But we're still not done. Skywatch TV's Off the Record series is back by popular demand with a brand new, never-before-aired DVD, The Gods of War Edition, featuring exclusive interviews with Detective Carl Gallups, Senior Pentagon Analyst Robert McGinnis, Derek and Sharon Gilbert on the coming hyper battle between the forces of God and the titans of biblical prophecy. This content is only available in this exclusive offer and will not be aired anywhere else. Included for a limited time with the Gods of War Super Collection. This unprecedented collection, sold separately, holds a retail value of $220. All 6 items, yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. This, without a doubt, is the largest special offer of the summer and is available only while supplies last. So don't delay. The Gods of War Super Collection, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order online or call 1-844-750-4985.
Driving the internet to think. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Hey, you want Bible study like you have never heard it before? Kind of laid back, like over a cup of coffee. Join the Gilbert House Fellowship. Sharon and I record it every Sunday morning, uploaded by midday Sunday. And you'll find the archives going all the way back to Genesis 1:1 at gilberthouse.org. That's gilberthouse.org. Joining us now as we talk about the tropes and terrors of Halloween, a guest who's been a this has become sort of an annual tradition around Halloween. He is an archaeologist, he is an historian, and an author. The book that I found very helpful early on in my studies down this road that we've traveled the last few years. Author of The Interview with the Giant, Ethno-Historical Notes on the Nephilim. Also, such books as The Shepherd's Sling, A Brief Guide to Biblical Giants and Their Relevance, and Religions of the Biblical World. His website is burtonbeyond.com, and we welcome back to the program your friendly neighborhood PhD, Dr. Judd Burton. Judd, welcome.
Hello, Derek. How are you?
Oh, we're doing fine. Thank you for joining us for the Shakedown Cruise tonight on A View from the Bunker as we go back to doing something we hadn't done since 2012. It's been 6 years since I've done this live, so we're knocking off some rust tonight, and I appreciate you being willing to serve as the test case.
Sure.
Halloween is become, I think we can argue that it's become the most popular holiday here in the United States on the annual calendar.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of pop culture and its prominence, I couldn't disagree with that.
The thing about Halloween, and this is something that's become more and more obvious to me over the last few years as I've done more study on the religions of the ancient world, and that's why I was happy to discover your book there, the Religions of the Biblical World, is how many of these ideas were known to people living in ancient Mesopotamia, the ancient Levant, ghosts, witches, demons, even the concept of zombies, although not called as such, are things that we can find in the writings that archaeologists have been digging out of the sand in Syria and Iraq over the last couple hundred years.
Yes, I think that, I think that people would be surprised to find that a lot of the sort of folkloric creatures and even more tangible things like witches show up in not just the literature, the sort of rhapsodies of ancient peoples, but they were things that they believed in, and as I said, in the case of witches, closer examination will find that they were strewn all over the ancient world. So that's very much an accurate observation.
Well, let's look at a couple of these. One of the ones that struck me as interesting, and we have had this discussion, annually for a number of years, but I think it's always good to bring it back and now to try to look at some of the spiritual sources for some of these ideas and concepts. I mean, most of us assume that, say, for example, vampires. The modern concept of the vampire was really the work of Bram Stoker. And maybe going back a little further, Dr. John Polidori, who was an associate of Mary Shelley, the author of Frankenstein, and who wrote a story called The Vampire, that's spelled with a Y. That's right. His villain was a very suave and debonair gentleman named Lord Ruthven, and almost a prototype of the Dracula character that Bram Stoker wrote about in his book. But the idea of consumption of blood goes back much earlier than that. In fact, in your book, Interview with the Giant, you speculate that these stories may actually have begun with some memory preserved through the survivors of the flood on the ark of the activity of the Nephilim.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, I do think that there's a pre-flood origin for those kinds of ideas. You get a very general look at the antediluvian world in the Genesis account, but it's, as I said on any number of occasions, and as you and many other people have echoed, these apocryphal sources shed a lot of light onto that world. And we don't ever equate them with Scripture, but the fact that they're referenced in both the Old Testament and the New Testament gives them some credibility. And in the case of the vampire and sustenance based on blood. This seems to be an idea that goes back to the condemnation of the Watchers and the giants themselves, the Nephilim, for all the crimes that they had committed against creation. And for the giants, they had really sort of set up the template for the vampire even before this judgment was handed down to them via Enoch. They were ravenously bloodthirsty to begin with. They consumed mankind's resources, and then they turned on mankind and consumed human blood and human flesh, and then they turned on one another. And the Book of Enoch is very clear about the judgment handed down to them, that their ultimate fate was to become evil spirits that would hamper man in all kinds of fashions, and would forever be hungry. I'm paraphrasing here, but would forever be hungry. That hunger never being sated, of course, but they would all of their aspirations would be tied up in hampering and feeding off of, after that, at least in a spiritual form, on the essence of humanity. And so that, in my mind, that idea goes back to the antediluvian world, and survives and then disseminates again after the flood.
Interesting, too, that the pagans of Greece and then later Rome had a very different idea regarding the demons. The origin of demons, according to Enoch, were the spirits of the Nephilim, who were forbidden to enter. Basically, they were condemned to wander the earth, as you said, until the judgment, causing harm to mankind, whereas the Greeks believed that these were the spirits of the men who lived during the Golden Age when Kronos ruled in heaven, Kronos being the king of the Titans. And I argue in my current book that the Titans were just the Watchers from Mount Hermon, which would make the men of the Golden Age. In fact, Homer and Hesiod, the two Greek poets who wrote a lot of what we know about Greek mythology, used the phrase meropes anthropoi to describe these men, and Homer specifically used them of the demigods, which, of course, as children of the gods means by definition they were Nephilim. So, but to the Greeks, these were kindly spirits, and they protected us from harm, and they gave us gifts and did good things. But you had to appease them. You had to offer them cult. You had to give them. There were communal meals that were held at these cult sites for Nephilim. Nephilim, the heroes of Greece. The spirits of the heroes, and hero obviously had a much different meaning in ancient Greece than it does today. A hero today could be the quarterback who really saves your fantasy football team this week. Whereas, in 500 BC, a hero was somebody who did something magnificent during life, whose spirit still influences the world after death, and so you venerate them. And oddly enough, it was Augustine in the 5th century A.D. who then tried to rehabilitate this idea in the practice of the veneration of saints. So that's neither here nor there, but the idea that the spirit realm, then the dead or the denizens of the spirit realm, could influence the land of the living was very common in the ancient world, not just with, say, the spirits of the Nephilim, but the thing that was really surprising to me was seeing how often in ancient writings from, say, the time of Abraham, almost 2000 BC, texts for exorcising demons or texts for cursing a witch who has cursed you or some such thing. How much a part of everyday life was casting spells, sorcery, witchcraft in the ancient Near East?
Well, it was a daily part of life, and sometimes I don't think that I don't think necessarily that we do this consciously all the time, but it's hard for us to imagine a world that is not primarily based on a secular viewpoint or a sort of materialistic viewpoint that a lot of people subscribe to. that was not really the case in the ancient world. People had a very real sense of the supernatural being part of almost every breath that they took. There was a sense that you had to placate the gods to keep the natural order of things in place. And so, it's a later example, but the Romans, for instance, I always use this example with my students, is that, they had their gods were called Numina, and they had a huge family of them. Basically every possible thing that you could imagine, the larder in the home, the hearth, your tool shed, the garden, the road. I mean, every possible material or spiritual thing that you could imagine had one of these noumena attached to it, and that idea was also very common throughout the ancient world in other places as well. And so when I say that people lived with this at almost every breath, it was a part of their everyday existence, and they had this idea that's even spelled out in the Bible about how these different gods and spirits had command, had dominion over different, geographical areas, gods of nations and gods of provinces, and getting as diffuse as you could possibly imagine. People in the ancient world, in the time that you're talking about, understood that,
and that's really reflected in the Bible, isn't it? We by the way,
as I say, that idea is also reflected in the Bible.
We're talking with Dr. Judd Burton, author of Interview with the Giant and Religions of the Biblical World, about Halloween here on A View from the Bunker. We talked about this a little bit on our Bible study, Sharon and me, today, as we were talking about Daniel chapter 5, which is, of course, the writing on the wall chapter, the incident with Belshazzar's feast, and discussing the idea of spirits with control over certain geographic areas. That was essentially the default belief in the ancient world. It kind of faded away a little bit as things got turned upside down as we moved from the Bronze Age into the Iron Age around the time of David and Solomon and so forth. But in ancient Mesopotamia, each city had its own patron god.
Sure.
For the moon god Nana for the city of and the sun god Shamash for the city of Sippar, and of course the chief of the pantheon at the time, Enlil, at Nippur. And then later in the book of Daniel, by that time, we're 6th century BC, the prince of Persia, the prince of Greece are mentioned. And so you've got that idea that these entities who were tied to certain geographic areas was very biblical. And I wonder how much of that then is reflected in the myth, to take it back to the vampire, and the idea that the vampire could only sleep on soil that he brought from his home country. You see that in the Dracula story.
Mm-hmm.
Like almost.
Well, that idea I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, almost like everything else in the vampire story, it's sort of a reversal of Scripture, because the Bible clearly spells out the concept of holy ground. The Syrian usurper to the throne, the Aramean usurper to the throne, Naaman, goes to visit the prophet Elisha because he's got leprosy and he's cured, and so he takes a couple of donkey loads of dirt back to Damascus with him so that he can bring some of Yahweh's holy ground with him. But, as with the vampires, reversing the mission of Jesus Christ, where he shed his own blood so that his followers could live forever, the vampire sheds everyone else's blood so that he can live forever. But even then, it's an upside down, backwards existence. He never sees the light of day, and he's got to sleep inside a coffin, and a coffin filled with, his unholy dirt.
Right. Yeah, if you look at that's very true specifically of the vampire, and if you look at the demonic realm in general, the message that Jesus brings, the trajectory of the Bible, all of the minutiae associated with that are typically turned on their head. It's a complete reversal, and that it's clearly seen in the form of the vampire. Instead of, as you say, instead of the giving of blood, you have the taking of blood. Instead of edifying, you have the tearing down. Instead of giving life, you have the taking of life. Everything associated with the demonic realm, and in this case, that of the vampire, is a complete reversal of the biblical message, of the Christian message.
We talked in the past about werewolves, and I want to talk about zombies too, but I want to hold that off until after we get past the top of the hour. But the werewolf is another concept that you relate to the Nephilim and their practices of consuming flesh. Are there other stories that we know of from the ancient world of, say, shape-shifting?
Well, there's certainly, not just in terms of city-state dwelling peoples, but all kinds of hunter-gatherer tribes and pre-literate sort of Stone Age level technology societies that have, this idea of people taking on animal spirits or being able to change into animals. That idea is almost universal, but there are some interesting precedents in the ancient world. The Lupercal festival that the Romans celebrated was on February the 15th, and it was a strange sort of rite. You had a lot of young men who would basically line up on the thoroughfares, and these were the Lupercal, and they would basically run down the thoroughfare in a sort of parade fashion, and they took leather tongs and they would slap the thighs of young women who were bearing them. This was supposed to, increase fertility or whatever. That's all. That was another thing that was tied up in this rite. I won't bore you with all the details of the Lupercal, but this was a central part of the celebration, and the name itself gives you some idea that it's associated with wolves.
Which
the first part of that, the Lupercalia. T.P. Wiseman wrote a really good paper in which he argued that I think it was T.P. Wiseman, who argued that the god of the Lupercal was actually Pan, the god of the shepherds, and who we talked about abundantly on this show.
Mm-hmm.
But part of the reason for this ritual and other rituals associated with the Lupercal was for not only the fertility of, general fertility of the population, but also the animal population, specifically the sheep and the goats that were being tended in the fields. And what I have only seen a couple of books actually talk about this, that one of the main reasons for the Lupercal, beyond the placation of Pan or whatever, was to ward off not just creatures like, bears or specifically wolves, but werewolves, these half-man, half-wolf creatures.
Sharon and I... go ahead.
I was just going to say that this is one of the most prominent festivals on the Roman calendar, and it deals specifically with warding off something that the Romans actually believed existed.
Now, the Romans inherited a lot of their cosmology, their religion from the Greeks, and in turn, the Greeks got a lot of it from their neighbors to the east, the Hittites, the Hurrians, the Luwians, and then the Canaanites and Amorites. You can draw some one-to-one.
The only caveat that I would offer there is that the Roman there was this core of Roman religion that existed before the Hellenization of before the Greeks set up colonies in Italy in about the 7th century BC.
Okay.
From then on, the idea that the Roman gods were anthropomorphic, in other words, they were human-like. That was an idea that yes, the Greeks did give to the Romans, but there were also these other. There's what I would call a core Roman religion, indigenous Roman religion, if you will. It's something that Augustine tried to bring back to a degree when not Augustine, excuse me, Caesar Augustus tried to bring back when he became the emperor. But that's the only caveat that I would offer there, is that it's yes, there's definitely Greek influence, but it's Greek influence wrapped around a Roman core.
Okay. Well, the reason I bring that up is because a few weeks back, Sharon and I did a program on Sci Friday about werewolves, and I was startled to learn something I should have known, and that there's an aspect of Zeus, who is Jupiter in the Roman pantheon, called Zeus Lycaeus, or Wolf Zeus. And apparently this is based around a strange ritual in Arcadia, which is sort of the rustic portion in southern Greece, which was the home of Pan, by the way, where on this Mount Lycaea, a particular clan would, and this is according to the writings of Plato, so according to Plato, a clan would gather on this mountain to make sacrifice every 9 years to Zeus Lycaeus, Wolf Zeus, and a single morsel of human entrails would be mixed in with the sacrificial meat. And whoever ate the human flesh would be turned into a wolf and could only regain human form if he didn't eat of human flesh until the 9-year cycle was over. So there's an older tradition, and there's some evidence, by the way, that this Mount Lycaea is actually the origin of the Greek Zeus cult, that Zeus was actually raised from a child there, not on the island of Crete. And but even as late as the 3rd century after the birth of Christ, a philosopher named Porphyry reported that another historian recording this had compared the sacrifice there to Wolf Zeus, or Zeus Lycaea, with the Carthaginian sacrifices to Baal Hammon. So, and interestingly enough, just a couple of years ago on this Mount Lycaea, they found the remains of a teen who appears to have been sacrificed at some point in the 2nd millennium BC, so sometime during the patriarchal age, apparently. So it does appear that the Greeks performed human sacrifice, at least in this one location, and it was to Wolf in his, or rather Zeus in his aspect of a man-eating wolf, or wolf. Yeah, it was. So again, this idea of humans turning into wolves and consuming human flesh is a lot older than poor Lawrence Talbot, played by Lon Chaney Jr.
Right. And later played by Benicio del Toro, I think, right, in the newer one. Anyway, we're revealing how much we love film.
Well, sometimes there's truth in these films if you know how to sift through the noise and get to the stuff at the heart of it, and hopefully. That's right. Hopefully, this will help some folks do this. We're going to take a quick break. I want to talk about zombies when we come back, because that seems to be I'm starting to sound like my dad now. The kids these days and the shows that they watch, zombies. Why are they so popular, and what do they really represent? Should we as Christians be enjoying that kind of entertainment? Our guest, author, historian, archaeologist, Dr. Judd Burton. And our conversation on terrors and tropes of Halloween continues as A View from the Bunker rolls on.
For thousands of years, mankind has debated how creation began. Ancient texts tell us the story. But today, the real message behind the pivotal account of the Garden of Eden has been obfuscated and lost. That is, until now. World-renowned author Carl Gallups digs up the hidden truths from the book of Genesis to finally give back the knowledge that was lost to the world. Find out what really happened in the Garden of Eden, what Jesus taught about Eden on the cross, and how the conflict between Jesus and the gods of antiquity is about to erupt on planet Earth, fulfilling biblical prophecy. In the new book, Gods of Ground Zero, this explains everything.
Cutting-edge analysis of end times prophecy on the very ground where it all unfolds. It's the Skywatch TV Wars of the Gods Tour of Israel, May 12th through 23rd, 2019, hosted by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. And Pastor Carl Gallups, best-selling author of Gods and Thrones and Gods of Ground Zero, Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat of Messiah of Israel Ministries, and filmmakers Justin and Wes Fall, producers of the Hollow Earth Chronicles. This is a once-in-a-lifetime tour of the Holy Land from Mount Hermon to the Dead Sea. You'll walk in Jesus' footsteps on the battlegrounds of the supernatural war with preaching and teaching along the way. Shiloh, Bethel, Mount Carmel, Nazareth, the Jordan River, the Mount of Olives, Sea of Galilee, the Garden of Gethsemane, and Jerusalem, where the final battle will be fought for God's Mount of Assembly, Zion. The Skywatch TV Wars of the Gods Tour of Israel. Reserve your place now. For information and registration, log on to lipkintours.com. That's lipkintours.com. Talking the Walk every Sunday night live from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. You can listen direct to your smartphone or tablet with the free mobile app, the View from the Bunker mobile app for iOS. That's, of course, iPhone, iPad, iPod Touch, Android phones and tablets as well. The apps are free, and you can find links to the iTunes App Store and Google Play at vftb.net. That's View from the Bunker, vftb.net. We're just a couple of days past Halloween. Our guest joining us, as he does every year at this time, author, historian, archaeologist, Dr. Judd Burton, joining us by phone from the beautiful state of Texas. Judd, zombies, 9 seasons now of Walking Dead, 4 seasons now of Fear the Walking Dead. I mean, if you had to venture a guess, what is it about the idea of these creatures that won't stay dead coming back and eating the flesh of the living that is attracted so much of a following?
Well, I think in the case of the shows that you mentioned, there's some, I think there's good writing. There's some interesting stories to be told, but the idea of the zombie is also one, I think, that goes back to the antediluvian world that I talk about in not just Interview with the Giant, but some other of my writings. This idea of consuming human flesh, cannibalism, is also something that seems to have sprouted out of that world, the antediluvian world. And creatures like this, revenants, almost in the way that vampires crave blood, but they crave human flesh, show up also all over the ancient world and find their way into more recent times as well. Not just the Haitian zombie, but also the things like the ghoul from Arabian folklore would also fit that sort of archetype. But I think beyond that, zombies are a kind of maybe the reason that they're so appealing now is that they're a kind of secular immortality. That most of the interpretations of zombies these days are completely bereft of, or I should say, largely bereft of a supernatural element. In other words, a soul that continues to reside. That they seem to be these soulless automatons, essentially. That, to my mind, represent a kind of postmodern immortality, I think, and that I think speaks to a lot of the viewing populace of these shows who have largely, I would posit have largely, abandoned a lot of classic religious ideas, particularly Judeo-Christian ones. But,
mm-hmm.
It's a postmodern kind of immortality.
It's and again, it's a very old idea. There's an ancient myth called the Inanna's descent to the underworld. Now, Inanna was the goddess of sex and war in ancient Mesopotamia. She was better known later as Ishtar, Aphrodite to the Greeks, Venus to the Romans. She shows up in the Bible as Astarte. Very influential. She's had a really good run, and she's really cleaned up her image in recent years, where she's now portrayed as the goddess of love. But back in the day, it was really the goddess of sex and carnal, gender fluid sex, and war. She was a very bloodthirsty deity in ancient Mesopotamia. And in this myth, and there's a text that dates back to the time of Abraham, the Old Babylonian period is what scholars call it, in which she wants to visit her sister, the Queen of the Dead, for some reason, presumably to extend her influence. Ishtar basically wanted everything, and she wanted it right now, and threatened to break down the gates of the netherworld to get in. And if the gatekeeper didn't let her in, she would break down the gates and release the dead who would then come up to the land of the living to eat the living, and according to this text, and the dead will outnumber the living. So it sounds like in the days of Abraham, 4,000 years ago, which was just retelling an older Sumerian myth from somewhere in the 3rd millennium BC. So 5,000 years ago, essentially, they were telling a story of dead who would emerge from the ground to consume the flesh of the living. So this is not a new idea.
No, that's why I say it's even for the Sumerians, it would have been recycled, because this was a if you want to use the word, this was a formula that you can track back through the literature to the antediluvian world. But what's interesting about all of these creatures, whether we're talking about vampires or werewolves or zombies, is that they're the ideation, at least on an intellectual historical level, the ideation of them doesn't go away. It gets completely recycled, and that you and I know, and the viewing audience, the listening audience, likely knows that that's not an accident. That's orchestration. That's part of the Luciferian plan. It has been from the get-go, and that's why these creatures are timeless, and you see them in Sumerian literature, and Babylonian literature, and Greek literature, and Roman literature, and even oral traditions. In fact, there are probably more of these traditions from the hunter-gatherer societies and non-literate peoples than there are from those that had written traditions. But thankfully, we do have written records, such as the ones that you alluded to, that tell us that these are not, this is not just fodder for, an AMC series. That it's something that's grounded in, it's grounded culturally, it's grounded in their literature and their religion, and as far as the people living in the ancient world, they took it to the bank. They believed in it heart and soul.
It's interesting, as we're talking to Dr. Judd Burton, his website is burtonbeyond.com on A View from the Bunker, that there are still animist religions today who hold this worldview where the dead need to be appeased and that they can influence the land of the living in a very negative way. Our friend, the Reverend Dr. Robert Bennett, author of the book I Am Not Afraid, about the reality of exorcism and demon possession, found that out when he was visiting Madagascar and saw their practices there, how they still have to feed and clothe and every now and again, dig up their ancestors and bring them out of the, well, they don't dig them up because they build houses for them and house them above ground in these crypts, essentially, that are nicer homes than the people live in. But they have to bring them out periodically to dance with them so that old, grandma doesn't get, nasty and start making trouble. The modern concept of the zombie came to America after the U.S. military invaded Haiti in 1915. I guess another one of our democracy-building missions. And so that resulted in the first modern zombie film, starred Bela Lugosi, no surprise, White Zombie.
White Zombie, yeah.
But the modern concept wasn't cemented until, say, Richard Matheson with I Am Legend, his 1954 novel, and then the George Romero film, Night of the Living Dead, of course. But what struck me about the Haitian concept, the voodoo concept of the zombie, and what they believe about it, and I'm by no means an expert on voodoo, but what little I've read suggests that their spiritual realm is governed by an intermediate level of beings between the creator and us humans, which was the same concept they had in ancient Mesopotamia. You had the gods at the upper tier, and then you had this middle level of the venerated dead, or these semi-divine beings. And maybe this is not the correct way to describe the Loa of Haitian belief. The Loa, I guess, would be considered more like watchers or fallen angels, and they have to be appeased or they can really make trouble for you. And there's one character in particular called Baron Samedi, who's depicted as a skeletal figure with a top hat. And if you don't do what he wants and appease him, he can make your afterlife really miserable, where you spend, and this is, again, what the Haitians believed, and Haitian religion was kind of a mashup of Roman Catholicism with West African religion when the slaves were brought over to Haiti in the 17th, 18th centuries. This Baron Samedi would make you live the rest of eternity as a zombie slave back in Africa. Sharon pointed out, which I'd forgotten, and I have no excuse because I had 7 years of French between junior high and high school and freshman year of college. Samedi is the word is the French word for Saturday. So this is Baron Saturday, which is Baron Saturn's day. Saturn being the Roman manifestation of Kronos, the Greek god who ate his children, and as I argue in my most recent book, the probably the same entity who was known to various cultures as Baal Hamon and Molech. So this Baron Samedi, and again, this is kind of a stretch, maybe drawing a false equivalence here, but that struck me as really odd that you've got this god depicted as a skeleton dealing with the dead, ruling with the dead, and if you don't do what you want, you're going to live eternity as a dead zombie, essentially, slaving away back in Africa. So, I'm just curious your thoughts, your take on this.
No, I don't think that's a stretch at all, Derek. I think once you start peeling back the layers of these entities, the similarities just jump out at you, and that's there's academic precedent for doing that sort of thing too. But most academics don't view it through the lens of of Christian faith, and so they're not coming to the same conclusions. I think you and I talked about this before. But when you do look at it through you take their work and look at it through the lens of the Bible, then these are the conclusions that you're left with. It's sort of like working up a suspect profile. If you're an FBI profiler, you've got together these characteristics, and if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, probably a duck. So I don't think you're very far off, and I'm of the same mind.
Yeah. Well,
so, and interesting that you bring up the placating of these spirits. Oftentimes, that's done in, as you say, in some sort of celebratory venue or a communal meal of some kind, taking food to where the dead were. This sort of thing is an old idea as well.
Well, credit where it's due. Sharon is the one who picked up on that connection again between Baron Samedi and Saturn. And again, it may just be finding similarity in the name there, but again, it may be just this is how the entities over the centuries and across language barriers and geographic barriers have manifested in different ways in different cultures to hit people where it would resonate. I mean, which is something we see with the UFO phenomenon.
Well, that's part of. That's why I'm so interested in this from an anthropological point of view, is because demons they're forming and manipulating and using culture. They're using culturally specific clothing, if you will, to garb these entities that are ageless. These deities that have been around for millennia, and if not longer.
Well, and let's talk again about these deities then, because I think we're in agreement that the source of many of these images and tropes that we see today, from witches and demons to devils and ghosts and so forth, are all, frankly, the result of the enemies of God, those who have these rebel angels, if you want to call them that, but these small g gods who for millennia have been rebelling against their creator. We're seeing a really, really successful rebranding effort aimed at our kids and our grandkids through pop culture, through TV, through movies, young adult novels, graphic novels. I was surprised to find out when I started digging into it, and it's because our daughter's beyond the age now where she's reading books like this. But the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series, to pick one, has been translated into more than 30 languages, and here in the United States alone has sold something like 92 million copies. And that series alone is now gaining. It's become so popular that Disney essentially hired and has licensed the author who created that series to put his stamp, his brand on stories that are now based on the myths and legends of India, the Hindus, of Korea, of the Mayans, and of the Norse. So, all these other cultures are coming in with different writers who are writing these books, because Rick Riordan can't write all of them. And I'm not blaming him for this. I mean, he's an old, school teacher, an English teacher, wanting to get kids to read, and he's creating these stories that are really engaging and entertaining. And, of course, they all feature teen and young teen protagonists that the readers can identify with in that age group. But then you've got these teachers' guides and study guides that are being put out there, encouraging teachers to ask their students, which God would you most like to be related to, and why? And as Christians, we've kind of forgotten that these entities were known to the prophets and the apostles, and they weren't, they were not on the same side as the people of God. So how do we begin to bridge that gap and begin to, turn this in another direction? How do we use culture, media, storytelling to change the direction of the generations that are coming up?
Well, storytelling is powerful. When you consider the form that we get the Word of God in, it's a big narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's it's as epic as, Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or, anything like that. I think some of the best advice that I ever got about just reading the Bible came from Mike Heiser. He said, I heard him say one time, suspend your judgment when you read the Bible. Read it like you're not taking the Bible as fiction, but read it as if it were fiction. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be extrapolated to all kinds of and expanded to all kinds of media, print media, movies, whatever. But the storytelling has to be good. It's got to be, it's got to grab you like. We need to think about movies like The Book of Eli. It's got to grab you like something like that. Just you figure out at the end of that movie, spoiler alert, that the main character is not Eli; it's the Bible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think the more creative that we can get about bringing the message in general of the Bible across, the better that it's going to be. But in terms of getting people to understand that, yes, the Bible is timeless, but it doesn't jettison these ideas that people in the ancient world had, such as, the gods of the ancient world, that we know as demons and fallen angels, ruling over geographical areas, ruling over, culture sets, ruling over different societies. That's a challenge. I think getting more people. I think that people are waking up to that. But getting more people to think about the Bible, not only the Bible, but the world that we live in those terms, is a big challenge. But I think that it can be done, and I think that new technologies that are coming available don't necessarily have to herald, the mark of the beast or anything, but they can, in fact. I'm not going so far as to say, embracing things like transhumanism or AI, but I'm just saying that there are platforms that are available that people are using right now, and who knows what's around the corner. We just need to be discerning about how we use them. But getting that message across about how people in the biblical world thought about these deities, these gods of the ancient world, little g ODS. Mm-hmm. Getting more people to understand that, and that's getting into the text itself and learning about the Hebrew and the Greek idioms behind the words and the culture of the day, and being anthropological, if you will, about reading the Bible, and realize that that's part of the message. That doesn't change. It's still applicable and becoming more so in the world that we live in.
So trying to understand what the prophets and the apostles knew about the world around them and how that might, kind of help us to understand the words that are written in the Bible. In other words, trying not to read the Bible as from a 21st century worldview.
That's right. Yeah, historians call that presentism. When you take a historical event out of context, you project modern conventions onto some event in the past. We need to keep in mind that the Bible is presented as a timeless message, and that those ideas associated with the things that we've been talking about tonight have not changed. They're still part of the reality of the world, and that somehow that's been scraped away, I would say, in recent decades in the teaching of the Bible. It
makes it a little hard to convince a a young person that the Bible needs to be taken seriously when we've at the same time told them that most of the characters in it are fictional or imaginary?
Right.
I think that's why we see a lot of a lot of horror fiction today. Just eliminates this spiritual, or at least the spiritual side as far as God is concerned.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. When you reduce the zombie to just a disease, it's a pathogen. Right. Yeah. Exactly. But therein lies the challenge. I think is getting back to, I don't want to wax nostalgic or anything, but I just remember, I had the blessing of growing up in a Christian home, and I was always surrounded by this stuff. But I learned a lot about biblical prophecy from my aunt, my great aunt on my mother's side, and there was no doubt in my mind that the way that she would talk about things, the things that she taught me, there was no doubt in my mind that we were still living in the same supernaturally structured world that the people during the biblical age were. So I don't know. When I talk about these things, I always think back to some of her lessons about biblical prophecy and the nature, the supernatural nature of the world. Getting that to ring true and those sort of lessons for young people, I think is key.
Yeah. We're in the middle of a war, and yet most of the people who are deployed on the battlefield, most adult Christians, aren't aware that the enemy is is even out there, and then wondering why they're getting shot.
Well, and it's I would go a step further and characterize it as right now it's a transdimensional Cold War. What happens when it breaks out and it's a conventional war?
Ah, okay, that's a really good way of putting it. Yeah,
you have to face it. Right now it's just it's submarines and spies. But what happens when the armies are marching down
right,
your neighborhood street?
Coming down from the uttermost north to do battle in the mountains of Israel.
That's right.
Yeah, that day is coming. So these tropes and this every year the celebration of Halloween and sort of desensitizing us to it, sanitizing us to it, is a way of getting children into the idea that ghosts and witches and goblins and werewolves and vampires and Frankenstein's monster ghouls and golems and zombies, it's all harmless fun because this is just playing dress up and you get lots and lots of candy for doing it. So this is a really cool thing, but it's sort of the gateway that opens up this fascination with the supernatural, which we humans are born with. It is part of our DNA, and it is a lure that draws more people in, as we're seeing this proven in in a lot of recent surveys. Millennials, as they're falling away from the church and falling away from the faith of the fathers, they're turning not to reason and atheism, but they're turning to the old ways. And there's something like 40% of American millennials right now believe that astrology is a science. Mm-hmm. Astrology is a science.
Yeah.
And yet they would look at folks like you and me who say, well, what's here in this Bible is actual history, including the stuff with the gods and the parting of the sea and the sun in the sky for a whole day. That's that really happened, and there are spiritual, supernatural reasons for it. And they would look at us like we're nuts.
Yeah. I mean, there's in the case of astrology, and its popularity amongst millennials, we're looking at the same thing from different viewpoints. Whereas a Christian can look at the biblical worldview or the biblical message and say, well, sure, there are things that happen in the heavens. But the Bible says that those things transpire to give glory to God.
Yeah.
Not to control the minute behavior of humanity.
To mark the seasons and to remind us of the times of the feasts and the festivals that Israel was commanded to keep, in order to the shadows had pointed to the substance that was to come, which is Christ. That was the reason for the calendar being set up the way it was in the calendar of feasts and festivals. Judd, we've gone through another hour very, very quickly, but I want to direct people your way. Where do people find out your stuff, and what are you working on? You got any projects coming up that you want to share with us tonight?
Sure. People can, of course, go to the websites, burtonbeyond.com, and the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, which is tioba.org. They can email me at professorburton@yahoo.com. And as far as projects are going, I'm building off of. I'm still working on this giantology text, which is something that I've spoken about on this program, and also at the last Sons of God conference.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the big project right now is kind of filling out and articulating the parameters of this implicit discipline that we're all involved in.
Yes, biblical giantology. And
that's it.
Yep, God willing, it will be a thing. The website, again, burtonbeyond.com, burtonbeyond.com, or TIOBA, the Institute of Biblical Anthropology, TIOBA.org. Judd, pleasure talking with you as always, and look forward to doing this again soon.
Thank you, Derek. Godspeed.
And it's even worse than I thought. I checked my numbers here, and it turns out that more than half of millennials, not 40%, more than half of millennials believe that astrology is a science in America today. God help us. Well, that's why we do this program. Coming up, we're going to kind of wrap up some thoughts here, tell you about some projects and things that we got in the works, and some good news to report this week from Kansas City. The stolen colon was returned. That's ahead as A View from the Bunker continues. I'm Derek-Gilbert.
Warren Marcus helps unlock the meaning from the ancient Hebrew of God's priestly prayer of the blessing and unfolds the mystery of this end times revelation on how this prayer, written by God Himself, can help you in your daily walk towards supernatural health, divine provision, and the power and authority to fulfill your God-given destiny and purpose. Skywatch TV is proud to announce the ancient priestly prayer of the blessing special offer. Through Warren's revelatory book, you'll discover the supernatural power of the Hebrew language, that the Shekinah glory is the manifest presence of the Heavenly Father, that Jesus Himself, the high priest of the new covenant, prayed this divine prayer over His disciples as He ascended into heaven, and that He's ready to pronounce this divine prayer over you now. Plus, order now and receive this beautiful, authentic, numbered replica of the ancient priestly prayer pendant with chain. In 1979, a Jewish archaeologist, Gabriel Barkay, discovered 2 silver amulets in a cave opposite the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. Inscribed on the silver in the ancient Paleo-Hebrew was the ancient priestly prayer of the blessing. It is the oldest intact Bible scripture in existence today and is 400 years older than the Dead Sea Scrolls. The front of this incredible, beautifully crafted pendant is inscribed with the divine prayer written in the ancient Paleo-Hebrew as originally discovered. The back includes the prayer inscribed in English just as we have in our Bibles today. Also included with each pendant, you'll receive an accompanying priestly prayer mini booklet, so you can carry the prayer with you and proclaim it over yourself wherever you go. But that's not all. Included within the pages of the mini booklet, a special free internet link where you can see and hear the divine prayer pronounced over you by Warren Marcus in the Amplified Hebrew to English translation. And you can hear world world-renowned Messianic worship leader Paul Wilbur singing the divine prayer over you in Hebrew. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of over $55. Yours now for your donation of only $30 plus shipping and handling. The Ancient Priestly Prayer of the Blessing special offer, available now at skywatchtvstore.com. Order now or call 1-844-750-4985.
The supernatural is our business. And business, well, better than we like. Welcome to A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Live worldwide from the beautiful Missouri Ozarks this Sunday, November 4th, 2018. Some of the bumper music tonight, by the way, coming from our friend Pastor Casper McLeod. That's the opening to a track called Kingdom of God. The first hour, I used some of the song called This World's a Mess. This is from his most recent CD called Revelation Rocker. And you can check out Casper McLeod, C-A-S-P-A-R, McLeod. Revelation Rocker is kind of a throwback to the music that I was listening to, guilty pleasure, back in the 1980s. Of course, that's when I was a top 40 radio disc jockey, so I think I can be excused. And thankfully, God has a sense of humor and a lot of patience, or I wouldn't be here right now. So, but anyway, Casper McLeod graciously allowing us to use some of his music for bumpers on this program as we were looking for things that wouldn't annoy the censors and the filters at places like YouTube for music that is copyrighted by folks that are aggressive in enforcing their copyright. Not that we're wanting to, pirate anybody's music to begin with, but they don't really, even though technically they're little snippets like this, it's, falls under fair use. They don't really, they don't go. Anyway, coming up next week, occult practices in the Christian church. As we kind of alluded to at the end of the segment with Judd Burton, it's worse than just ignoring the reality of the biblical account. We have gotten to a point in American Christianity where our theology is so poor that we're actually embracing occult techniques that are coming in from Eastern mysticism because we don't recognize them for what they are. So that will be our subject next week as we talk with Josh Peck, our friend and colleague at Skywatch TV, and Stephen Bankars, an incredible young man, both of them actually incredible young men. They are the co-authors of the important new book, The Second Coming of the New Age. And this is one that is very important. If you watch Skywatch TV, and I hope you do, you will have seen the programs, the interviews that we've conducted with those two men over the last month. Tom Horn, the publisher, feels very strongly about this book. And Dr. Michael Heiser, whose theology has been so foundational for me and Sharon with beginning to grasp the divine counsel concept and how important that is, wrote the foreword to the book. He was impressed enough about the topic and the understanding of Josh and Stephen of the importance that Mike agreed to write the foreword. So that will be next week's program, Sunday, November 11th. Stephen Bankars, Josh Peck, Second Coming of the New Age. Both of those guys, by the way, coming out of the New Age movement. I won't try to recap their stories for you because I wouldn't do them justice. But we may get into some of that next week. But certainly we'll be talking about some of the things that are showing up in our churches now that really have no business in our churches because we ought to know better. But when 60% of American Christians don't believe that Satan is real, that he's a literal entity and not just a symbol, or that the Holy Spirit is an entity, a real entity, and not just a symbol of God's love, well, it's no wonder that these things are coming into the church because we don't take things seriously. We don't understand the literal truth of Scripture, and that there are evil intelligences out there who want to kill you and everyone that you love. If you don't think the enemy is real, the fight isn't going to matter to you. Jesus becomes nothing more than a cosmic life coach. Here, do this if you want to be happy, healthy, wealthy, and wise. A lot of itching ears willing to hear that kind of a gospel message, but that's not the gospel message, and it's not going to save you from the consequences, the wages of sin, which are death. So millennials, the people roughly 18 to 30 years of age right now, our daughter falls into this age group, they are disillusioned with what passes for teaching in our churches these days, and who can blame them? I mean, frankly, when I was a kid, attending mainline denomination, Protestant denomination churches, I was frankly really bored because Jesus was just kind of held out there as, well, here's how you should live, and here's an example, and this is what you do. And, it was very formulaic. We had a couple of, through most of my childhood up until the time I went off to college, 2 churches, 2 pastors, three pastors that I remember. And it always seemed like the formula was open with a joke, sermon for 10 minutes, maybe 15, close with a joke, and then you're out in time to beat the lunch rush. Okay, fine, but, I made it to adulthood before I really heard anything about that really emphasized sin and salvation, the shedding of blood for the remission of sins. I mean, it was kind of alluded to and mentioned a bit around Easter, but, when Satan was mentioned at all, it was in the context of some of these stories like, the temptation in the wilderness, and Jesus was held up an example of how, you just have to have faith to overcome these obstacles. It was not communicated to me that I recall that Satan was a literal entity who identified himself in the ancient world as the storm god of the Canaanites and the Greeks and the Romans. It's right there in the Bible if you know what you're looking for and you know what the apostles and the prophets believed. Zeus was the storm god. Zeus was just a Greek manifestation of the god in the Bible called Baal. And it's clear when you put the pieces together. Isaiah 14, the connection between the Mount of Assembly in Isaiah 14 and the mountain that the archaeologists and historians know was considered the holy mountain, or the mountain sacred to the storm god Baal, Mount Zephon. And then Jesus references to Baal and Satan and Zeus and Satan in the New Testament. It's pretty clear. So suddenly, Liam Neeson shouting, "Release the Kraken," takes on a whole new connotation. Oh, okay. The guy who Jesus identified as Satan has just said, "Release the dragon-like monster from the abyss." Oh, well, that would be the beast coming out of the sea. That would be the Antichrist, wouldn't it? Yeah, it would. But we don't take it seriously. Zeus is made up, and so besides, these stories are just getting the kids to read, so there's no harm. So it's no wonder that kids are reaching 18, 25, 30 and thinking, okay, well, there's nothing in the church for me because this really is just nothing more than a bunch of rules telling me not to do stuff that is fun. So instead, they're turning to astrology. They're turning to palm reading, aura reading, mediumship, communicating with spirits, tarot card reading. All of this stuff is taking the place of the Christian church. Guys like Richard Dawkins got to be tearing out their hair. The neo-atheists thought they were making some headway as they found that young people here in America and the West were leaving the church in droves, only to find out that they're returning to the old gods, because that's exactly what is happening. And Halloween is part of bringing them into the fold that way. Yeah, the supernatural is real, but isn't it fun? It's cool. No harm. And there are these, we warn people about Ouija boards. Even the shysters on television, the ghost hunters, will warn of the dangers of the Ouija board. And yet they don't go to the Bible, which is the source, the definitive source, the authoritative source as L.A. Marzulli calls it, the guidebook to the supernatural, for instruction on how to deal with the supernatural realm. If you got problems where you think your house is haunted, don't consult a medium. That's going to make the problem worse. You want to have a happier life? Don't dabble in sorcery and witchcraft. That's going to make the problem worse. But sadly, that's not the way trends are going. Now, we're friends with a lot of people that I respect, who see our nation, our culture, on the verge of another great awakening. And I really pray that that's true, because we really need it. We need revival. But statistics don't show things going that way. And scripturally speaking, prophetically speaking, I think we're more likely falling into the great apostasy, the great falling away, as we see practices that should be forbidden entering the church and embraced, like contemplative prayer. We'll talk about that next week with Stephen and Josh. It's even coming into our schools. I had an email this week from a woman who was concerned because her daughter was at a school that had adopted a practice called Mind Yeti. Mind Yeti, Y-E-T-I. Yeti, abominable snowman. This is a reference to the Himalayas, to India, which is appropriate because Mind Yeti is promoting mindfulness. And mindfulness is just the first step on the 7-step path towards nirvana in Buddhist teaching. It's being promoted to teachers as a meditation tool that will help children settle down, be less aggressive, more focused, calmer, less stressed. But again, it's based on Eastern mystic teachings, and the goal being nirvana, which is essentially the emptying of one's self and the opening of one's self to the spirit realm. The app, because Mind Yeti has an app out there that you can download, which is similar to the app being promoted by Dr. Stephen Greer for teaching you how to psychically contact extraterrestrials. Essentially, it is tech to help you get possessed. There have been some recent surveys conducted at the academic level. Brown University did a study recently, talked about this last year when it was published, which didn't go over well with practitioners of transcendental meditation, but it found that some people, a surprising number of people, who engage in transcendental meditation, which is essentially the same thing that they're teaching kids with mindfulness, chanting a mantra to focus, relax, de-stress, are actually finding themselves more stressed after these meditation sessions, more stressed, more depressed, and in some cases even suicidal. And they can't, researchers can't figure out why. And the teachers of TM are not sure what's going on there either. Well, okay, it's not for everybody. Maybe it's bringing up old bad memories that are better left buried in the subconscious. No. Scripturally speaking, this is like the person who has a demon that's cast out, but it's, without accepting the Holy Spirit through accepting Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior. It's like the house that's swept clean and left empty, so the spirit wanders around through the wilderness, comes back with 7 more spirits that are even worse than itself, and the person's worse off after than before. Because you're participating, you're engaging in behavior that God was very specific about in the Old Testament, the books of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. Don't do this stuff. Do not use mediums. Do not consult with necromancers. Do not engage in witchcraft or sorcery. The very things that we encourage through dress up and play and free candy with our children and grandchildren every year at Halloween. And like I said, the enemy, very old, very smart, much smarter than you and me, using every possible avenue of attack. Our churches, our schools, pop culture, to convince us that any path is true. They don't care what we believe as long as it's not the one thing that's true, which is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus Christ, the only path to the Father. No. So, shifting gears here on A View from the Bunker. Tuesday, of course, is Election Day, which, calling back to the opening of the program, is this time in the calendar reserved every couple of years for these hideous creatures to emerge from their hiding places to torment us with political advertising and campaign promises that they'll never keep for another couple of years. We got to go to the polls anyway. I mean, we do. As citizens, we need to cast our vote, research the topics, and cast our vote to the best of our ability, while as Christians understanding that we are not going to save the nation at the ballot box. There are important issues that are decided through our vote, but the temptation, and this is another avenue that the enemy uses to attack us, the temptation is to try to save the world by imposing our standard of morality at the ballot box. Again, not that we shouldn't vote for representatives who hold a biblical standard of morality, but our ultimate goal, remember, our prime directive as Christians is to make disciples of all nations. Now, I know this will never happen, but think about this. If we were to change the hearts of everyone around us so that they accepted Jesus Christ and lived to the best of their ability, according to God's standard of righteousness, most of the laws on the books would be unnecessary. We wouldn't need to worry about how many conservative justices are on the Supreme Court, because the cases that have been decided at the Supreme Court level that have had just horrific consequences here in the United States, Roe v. Wade, would never have gotten that far because nobody would want to do the things that we're trying to pass the laws to ban. So, but again, our default setting as humans is depravity, so that ain't never going to happen. I'm just saying, research your candidates, vote, participate as a citizen in the freest nation on God's green earth. But then on Wednesday morning, if your candidate doesn't win, if our candidates don't win, we're still called upon to pray for those leaders who do get elected. Because even if there's some, shall we say, irregularities, the person who gets in, according to Scripture, is a person that God is allowing. And so we need to pray for them. Easier said than done, but like I've said before, if this job was easy, we'd all be doing it. Here in Missouri, we've got some interesting ballot initiatives, and I confess this is one I don't know as much about as I probably should, and that is medical marijuana. I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to a lot of medical claims for a lot of different things, not just marijuana, not just cannabis, but I do know some people who have benefited a lot from cannabis oil in ways that I would not have expected. So, okay, I'm willing to consider that for people with certain medical conditions that I am grateful I have not had to endure, medical marijuana may literally be a godsend. So just saying that up front. I don't know if it's as helpful as its proponents say. I'm a little skeptical because I know that there's a lot of money to be made here. And anytime that there is a lot of money to be made, there are those who will oversell in order to get their piece of the pie. But here in Missouri, it's just kind of odd that there is a real rush. We have three ballot initiatives to legalize cannabis on the ballot here in Missouri Tuesday. And it's not really clear what's going to happen if all three of them pass. We don't really know how this shakes out if all three of these initiatives pass. And two of them are amendments to the state constitution. Now, there are some things that I think just should not be enshrined in the state constitution. And in fact, when I was hosting the daily secular talk radio program back in 2006 and 2007, in the 2006 election, there was a proposition on the ballot to make embryonic stem cell research constitutionally protected. And there was a lot of money that was thrown at that ballot proposal, and almost all of it came from one rich guy with a company that he had started in Kansas City to research embryonic stem cells and their therapeutic potential. More than 90% of the money on that particular ballot initiative was coming from a guy who had a direct vested financial interest in getting it passed. And sadly, because they ran a lot of ads, very famously, this is when Michael J. Fox recorded an ad for this initiative and had purposely not taken his medication to control the symptoms of his Parkinson's disease before the filming. So he came across as very sympathetic. And again, I don't know what it's like to suffer as he does, so I cannot say that I don't want to criticize Michael J. Fox for making the commercial, because for all I know, he truly believed that someday embryonic stem cell research would come up with a cure for his disease. Well, it hasn't. I mean, adult stem cells certainly has, but embryonic stem cell research means you've got to create an embryo and then kill it to harvest the stem cells. And as a Christian, I have a real problem with that. If the 2006 election had taken place a couple of weeks later, because the polls were turning as people realized what was going on there, it might not have passed. It did pass by a narrow margin. So now embryonic stem cell research in the state constitution here in Missouri. Well, we got a couple of ballot initiatives to legalize the sale of marijuana in the state for medical purposes. Okay, but should they be constitutional amendments? I don't think so. One of the amendments would impose a 4% tax on marijuana sales. Missouri Department of Health and Senior Services would be in charge of implementing the program, and that includes licensing medical marijuana cultivation facilities and dispensaries. The other proposed amendment is the work of a physician and a lawyer in Springfield, our neck of the woods here, who has put up most of the money himself to get this on the ballot. This would call for a 15% tax on medical marijuana sales, and half of the money raised would pay for a new medical research center that would be devoted to curing cancer. A noble goal. This particular physician and attorney would be in charge of setting up the board to oversee the center. Then we've got a proposition, which would be would essentially be a law, not a constitutional amendment, a law. Proposition C here in Missouri would change state law, but would not alter the Constitution. And this would impose a 2% tax on the sale of marijuana. The money raised would be split among veteran services, drug treatment, and early childhood education. The question again is, what happens if all three of these initiatives pass on Tuesday? Attorneys, not quite sure. The constitutional amendments would likely supersede Proposition C. But then how do we decide between Amendment 2 and Amendment 3 if they both pass? And whichever one gets some more votes, I don't know. But again, I know from back in Illinois and hearing some of the debate in Illinois that there is money to be made here. And so there are interests at work. And as we know, the love of money is the root of all evil. I just pray that whatever happens on this ballot initiative on Tuesday, that it is to the benefit of those who truly need the help. And one final note, just a bit of good news to report as we wrap up our week here on Sunday night. The stolen colon, hashtag stolen colon, in Kansas City has been found and returned. We saw this story pop up a couple of weeks ago. This is a giant inflatable colon, weighs several hundred pounds. It's used as a teaching tool by the Colon Cancer Coalition. They essentially take it out and people can walk through this giant colon and see what a colon sort of looks like on the inside and why it's a good idea to be screened. Now, I'm not trying to play colorectal cancer for laughs. I am of an age where I have undergone the screening. the PrEP and all of that stuff, which is not fun, but it is the third leading cause of cancer deaths in the United States, and 60% of those are preventable if you get screened. So the fact that we're talking about this, the fact that it got so much media attention, Kansas City police even weighed in with the hashtag stolen colon, was a good thing. The thing that's humorous is thinking what kind of the looks on the faces of the guys who stole this off of the back of a pickup truck a couple of weeks ago when they realized, what they actually had taken. I mean, it was probably there, something they thought they could grab and flip for a few bucks somewhere. Okay, well, let's inflate this and see what we got. Oh, it's not a bounce house. What? Mm-hmm. And the next time they go to meet their criminal buddies, I'm sure they got all kinds of grief. But the good news is it has been returned. And on top of this, even better news, a fundraiser organized by the Colon Cancer Coalition to buy a new colon raised more than twice as much as they needed to replace it. So they've actually been able to add 2 new colons and presumably a semicolon. Ba-dum-tsh. So anyway, good news to wrap up the week. We got, a lot of things coming up in 2019. We've kind of run out of time, so we'll tell you about those in the weeks ahead. Conferences already filling up the calendar for 2019. Dallas, San Antonio, Branson once again, and perhaps even more. We will leak those out as information becomes, as we are given permission to do so in the weeks and months ahead. Leave us a review at Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are sold. Give us a like at our Facebook page. That's View from the Bunker, which is a production of Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Our opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod, www.incompetech.com. Our announcer is D.C. Good. Remember, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. I'm Derek Gilbert, and this is A View from the Bunker.